All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're breaking down one of the most incredible moments in the entire saga, the finale of Part 1, the Sermon of the Seven Shards. And let me tell you, this is way more than just a speech. This is the moment our main character, a jester named Der Grungoldenar, unveils his truly terrifying new form and essentially declares war on reality itself.
And it all boils down to this single chilling line. These words, they mark the end of a brutal, harrowing journey of survival and the beginning of something so much more dangerous. The character we thought we knew, gone, replaced by a new kind of force, one that's about to change all the rules of the game. So let's paint the picture. Our jester, Der Grungoldenar, is standing on this limestone ridge. He's just clawed his way out of a place called the Erdar, a true trial by fire. But here's the thing. He didn't just crawl out alive. He was reborn. He was completely remade into what the text calls a fully realized archetype. This is his resurrection.
Now, understanding this idea of resurrection is absolutely crucial. We're not talking about just coming back from the dead. This is a fundamental transformation. He's not really a man anymore, he is an idea. He's the living, breathing embodiment of the very abyss he survived, what the story calls the maw.
And this comparison just illustrates that shift perfectly. You have the horned guardian, this rooted being who is static, complete, his job is done. But the jester? He's now fluid becoming, a constant, ever-changing force whose real story, well, it's only just getting started. One is an ending. The other is a terrifying beginning. So now we get to the sermon itself, and really, it's less of a prayer and more of an all-out declaration of war. And his target? Something he calls the spirit of gravity, which is basically the crushing weight of everything society holds dear. Its values, its laws, its traditions, they're all on the chopping block. He kicks things off by going after wealth. The very first pillar of society he wants to shatter is our concept of value, and he does it with the parable of the heavy coin.
And here's where we see his new philosophy crystallize. For him, gold isn't treasure. It's just soil waiting to reclaim its form. He's screaming into the wind that our idea of money is a cage, a shackle for the masses. True wealth, he says, is active laughter, a wild, expressive, totally unrestrained life that just spends itself without a single thought for profit. Okay, so from wealth, he moves on to his next target, power, law, and justice. He brings up the fate of a character called the Red Judge and channels it into the parable of the burning chair, which is a direct assault on the entire structure of our legal system. He just openly mocks what he calls the beautiful cages of the lawmakers. To him, any law that doesn't have a living, breathing spirit behind it is just an inferno of nihilism. A fire that just burns everything down without creating anything new. He says he burned their courthouses just to prove that justice is nothing but a ghost. And for his third parable, he takes aim at our idea of strength, the whole myth of the glorious warrior. He thinks back to the slaughtered trackers in the meadow, and through their failure, he completely dismantles the idea of heroic might. And this is such a powerful idea. The warrior's heroic destiny was totally undone by what the jester calls the verdant absurdity. And why? Because how do you fight something that refuses to be your enemy? Brute force is useless. It just shatters when it comes up against something that won't play by its rules. Okay, so he's just systematically torn down society's foundations, wealth, law, and strength. But then, the sermon pivots. The war against the external world is done. Now, he's about to reveal the even bigger war he waged inside of himself.
And this is where it gets really, truly intense. The jester explains that his most important fights weren't against judges or warriors. No, they were against the ideas of fate, of history, and against the very nature of his own ego. He starts this inner confession with a direct challenge to destiny itself. This parable is aimed right at the vulva, those mythical weavers of fate who are supposed to map out the course of everyone's life. This is his ultimate act of rebellion. He claims he used something called shadow necromancy to literally snip the threads of his own destiny. For him, the past isn't a cage that defines what he can be. It's just fuel. It's fuel for the fire of his will, this new being he calls the Willionaire. Next, he describes what sounds like the ultimate test of the self. He had to face what he calls the ego's eclipse inside a cave of pure negation, basically a place of absolute, total nothingness. And this leads him to this incredible philosophical breakthrough. Think about this.
He looked into a void, saw no reflection of himself, and yet he didn't disappear. That proved to him that his I, his very existence, doesn't need any outside approval to be real. He is his own audience and the star of his own show.
And all this deconstruction of the outer world and conquest of the inner world, it all leads to the sermon's grand finale. Now, he's going to forge all those broken pieces into a brand new and frankly terrifying philosophy of what it means to be alive.
He calls it the parable of the twin sons, and this image here just captures it perfectly. He's no longer torn between these two warring halves of his soul, the gold curse on one side and the verdant absurdity on the other. He has forced them together into a single unified whole inside himself.
And this is the key to his final form. He calls it divisible unity. He's become a self-contained universe. The very same conflict that should have ripped him apart is now the source of his power. He is his own opposition, and he is his own resolution.
And this new being has a name, the Willinaire, which translates to the willful. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a force of nature whose existence is completely self-determined. Its will burns like an absolute fire, and it doesn't need a god or a sun or anything else to keep it burning. Which brings us to the seventh and final parable. He's defined what he has become. Now he's going to tell us what he's going to do. This is his new mission statement for the world. And the implication here is just bone-chilling. The gesture concludes that the only rational way to respond to a completely absurd universe is to treat it like a game. The world is no longer a story of suffering to be endured. Oh no, it's a playground, and he's the only one who really knows the rules. The era of active play is about to begin. And with his sermon finished, he doesn't wait for applause or an answer. He just steps back onto the path toward civilization, this new kind of God, ready to unleash his saga of frenzy. And that leaves us with the terrifying question that closes out part 1. As this Willinaire comes to wake up the sleeping world, are we going to be players in his new game, or are we just the pieces on the board?